Hey guys, about a year and a half ago, we did some work on my 1979 Corvette. The engine was running absolutely terrible, and with a little bit of TLC, we managed to get the ignition system functioning and the fuel system basically working. Got this thing to run and idle pretty well. Check out, I'll throw a link up in the corner there to one of those videos. But time and work and those kinds of things get in the way, and I didn't get back to working on it some more. As I said in a previous video, I've got a new house, and unfortunately I need to get everything out of my messy garage so that I can get the old house up for sale, so I can afford to build a new garage at the new house. One of the things we need to do to make that happen is we've got to get the Corvette out of here. Now I could call a tow truck and get it towed over to the new place, and probably from a time frame standpoint that would be the better way to do it, but that wouldn't make very good video content for you guys. So let's see if we can get a few items knocked off the list here. One thing that this car has a problem with is the transmission leaks like a sieve. I think it's either the dipstick tube or the kickdown cable O-ring has cracked on it. So if we dump too much in the way of tranny fluid in it, it's just going to come running out on the floor. I'm not going to worry about that today. What we do have to worry about is brakes. A couple of items that we've got in the brake system. We've got calipers that are leaking. We've got rusty brake rotors. And we've got a seized up master cylinder over there. So let's get going. We'll get a few of these little details sorted out, and I'll bring you guys along for the ride. Take the cover off of the old master cylinder, and as you can see, it's pretty near bone dry. The front is completely dry, or the front circuit, which is this back one, and there's a little bit left in the rear circuit, but not a whole lot. A little bit of rustiness down in the bottom of there. Before I go to all the hassle of changing out this master cylinder, let me hop in and kind of just step on the brake pedal. I'm pretty sure it's seized up. I tried it back when we were trying to get the engine running, and it was being a little on the grumpy side. But what the heck? No sense doing a bunch of work if we don't have to. Hopefully that's got you guys looking at what you want to see. Ho ho! Well, that saves us a little bit of hassle. At least we've got a pedal that moves a little bit. Unfortunately, I don't have any brake juice. Gonna have to go for a little parts run. Well, let me go for a parts run, and I'll be right back, and we'll dump a little bit of fresh juice in this. Now, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get my choice flavor of brake fluid if I'm able to find anything, because the only place open now at this time of day is going to be Walmart. I'm going to end up with DOT3 brake fluid. And on this older equipment that tends to sit a lot, I always use DOT4. And the reason that I use DOT4 is it's less, they call it hygroscopic. And you'll notice, if we look down in the bottom of the reservoir, I don't know how well that shows up for you guys without blinding you with this LED light, but the brake fluid is nice and clear still. A little bit of rust in there, but nothing major. And the reason that it's like that instead of being all black is because I use DOT4 brake fluid instead of DOT3. The three main flavors are DOT3, DOT4, and DOT5. DOT3 and 4 are interchangeable. 4 is just less likely to soak up moisture, and DOT5 is silicone based, and while it's a perfectly good brake fluid, it tends to be used in higher performance stuff, race cars, that kind of thing, and you need special seals to use DOT5 brake fluid instead of 3 or 4. So those are not interchangeable. But 3 and 4 is the better. Let me run to Walmart, see if I can find a couple of containers of DOT3, and we'll see if we can get this master cylinder to start doing something. I picked up 3 bottles of DOT3 brake fluid, just whatever they had at Walmart. As I say, this time of night in this small town, so much for the auto part place being open. Probably should have gotten going on this a little earlier in the day, and then I would have been able to get DOT4. When you're putting brake fluid in, you should always use a sealed container. As I say, brake fluid, it's glycerin based, I believe it is, and it has a bad habit of soaking up water, kind of along the lines of ethanol based fuel, with about the same results. Anything we want to make sure we don't do is get any brake fluid on the paint of the car, because brake fluid and paint don't agree. Well, I didn't even use up one full container. Get the bellows back up mostly in place. I'll put this cap back on, and primarily I'm doing that because I don't want it to spray all over the place. Brake fluid, paint, not much distance, that kind of thing. Well, let me pump the brakes a few times and see if we get anything. There we go, now we're broken free. I had half pedal, now I got full pedal, or full pedal stroke. We're not building up any pressure yet. I do feel a little bit of something happening, that's good. Finally got the pedal to brake loose. Managed to pump some fluid through. Something tells me though that we're not going to get any brakes out of this because the calipers are leaking like a sieve and the pads are saturated in brake fluid and there's a bunch of air in the system. But being able to get this master cylinder working without having to change that out is probably a good thing. Not that I don't have a spare. Next step is, I think, we can get some air and some tires. Hopefully they'll take air. We'll fill these tires up and then maybe we'll throw a jack under it and see if we can get it up on jack stands. One thing we want to make sure that we do before we jack this thing up in the air is we want to just take a little bit of a I'm going to break these nuts loose while the car is still sitting on the tire. These are chrome lug nut, and if we hit them with an impact gun, which would normally break them free, it tends to chew the chrome up pretty bad. So my preference is always to use breaker bar. You can see these lug nuts are going to need a little bit of a cleanup anyways, but definitely hitting them with an impact gun will chew them up a lot worse than this breaker bar does. Well, we can certainly see why this tire doesn't do a very good job of holding air. It's certainly had its fair share of sitting, unfortunately. But if we're going to be putting this thing on the road, definitely it's going to need 4 new tires. That's not necessarily what we're trying to accomplish here, though. We're just trying to get it till we can move it across town. Take a look at what we've got here. Definitely got a rusty rotor. Caliper's got some rust on it. Quite honestly, this side doesn't look bad at all, other than it needs to be pulled apart and have all that surface rust ground off of there. That's good news. That makes this job a lot easier. Let me pull the other side off and we'll see what it looks like. I'm pretty sure the other side has brake fluid all over the place. We've got all the lug nuts off on this side. The wheel's just sitting on here loose. And before we pull it off, I'm just trying to put a little bit of a spin on that and it doesn't want to turn. So something tells me that we're going to be into some issues here. Yeah, you can see all the wetness on the top of that caliper. That is all brake fluid that's leaked out around. So we are going to have to change this caliper out for sure, and these brake pads. And likewise on the other side, the rotor is going to need a good cleaning. What works good with that is a die grinder with like a flap disc or a Scotch brake pad on it, and that'll clean that rotor up in no time. But I think that is going to be tomorrow's job. It's getting a little late here. It's been a long day for me, so I'm going to pack it in. We'll come back at this in the morning and work on it till probably lunchtime, see how far we get, and then I'm going to have to stop and edit the video so you guys have something to watch on Sunday morning. Hey guys, it's day 2. We're back at it. The morning's starting to get away from me here, and it's starting to get warm in the garage. But let's get some more progress made on these brakes. As you can see, I've done a little bit of scrubbing with the die grinder on here already, just a couple of quick seconds. And it's taken the surface rust off the rotor quite nicely. Now, when you're dealing with brakes that have rust built up on them here, the reason you want to take the die grinder and clean them up rather than just using the brake pads is it will supposedly glaze over the brake pads and then they won't work very well. This front side shouldn't be too bad to get at because I can spin it. So we'll clean that up. The backside, however, is going to be a bit more of a challenge. I think we're going to have to pull that caliper off of there and go at the backside, get that cleaned up. Also gives us a chance just to quickly look at the pads. But I'm going to set you guys down here and we'll just do a little bit of a time lapse and get some grinding done. We've got the worst of the surface rust peeled off the outside of the brake rotor here. I don't know how well this light's working for you guys. I can certainly see, there's a little bit left on there, but I'm not too worried about it. We've got to take this caliper off and spin it up out of the way so we can get at the back side. And there's a couple of bolts here. I don't know how well that's showing up. And here there's one, and same on the other side. That allows us to flip this caliper up out of the way. We'll hang it down on the suspension so that it doesn't hang off of the brake hose, and then we'll be able to get at the back side and clean this up. This caliper here has some surface rust on the outside, but I'm looking at it. It's still got the little rubber cap on the bleeder screw. The pads look basically brand new. I think this is probably one of the last calipers that I changed. These C3 Corvette calipers were kind of they were okay when they were being used, but they don't stand up to sitting all that well. And absolutely positively, no shortage of sitting this car has done in the last 10 or 12 years. As you can see, that's still that's not painted, I don't believe. That's just raw cast iron. So this definitely hasn't seen any water. This is all just kind of surface rust from condensation being in an unheated garage in northwestern Ontario. Well, now that we've got the caliper off, I guess we can just take this whole rotor off pretty easily. The backside's not actually in that bad a condition. We probably could have just left that, but let's get this side cleaned up, then we can put it all back together and move over onto the other difficult side. I'm going to grab a fresh pad. As you can see, that's kind of glazing over, and that's what we don't want to happen to the brake pads. It's taken the worst of the surface off of there, but there's some more kind of a little bit deeper bonded scale that I'd like to get off. So let me grab a fresh pad. I've got a couple of different pads we can try here. This one's specifically a rust remover. It's kind of like a foam with grit on it. Does a really nice job. And wow, did that ever peel that rust off of there. I think I got these from Amazon. If I did, I'll throw an affiliate link down in the description. And that definitely is a phenomenal way to get rid of that rust off of the surface of this rotor. Well, let's cut the back side. Now that we're here, and we've got this really good wheel on the die grinder, let's see if we can get a little bit more off of the front side. Wow, that cleaned up nice. That looks very good to me. Let me get some brake clean and a rag. We'll wipe off any residue that we have on there, and then we can start putting this back together. And hey, we're actually going to use brake clean to clean brakes instead of using it as a general parts cleaner. It's a bit of a challenge to get these pads back on the rotor, and the reason for that is, of course, with conventional brakes you usually only have one piston to worry about, and in this case we've got four. It's a 4-piston caliper. You can kind of see these lumps here are each a piston, and likewise on the back side. So getting the there's 4 return springs that we need to worry about, one in each one of those pistons, and we also need to deal with 2 pads that are loose and floating around. And it is a little tricky to get these bolts in, because the bolt doesn't actually go into the spindle. The bolt goes into the caliper, so you're just going through a hole in the spindle. You want the caliper to sit in just the right spot so that the bolt lines up with the threaded hole. There we go. We'll get both of them started. These are fine threaded bolts. They're fine threaded bolts, so they take a while to snug up. And there we are. Now the rotor is seated down on the hub properly. Good like new. Now we're not completely finished here on this side because we've still got to bleed brakes. And that's going to be a bit of a challenge to do without having an assistant. But when we get the other side caliper replaced, we've got this top bleeder screw. The hose goes in on the bottom, and we back this top bleeder screw off and let the air out. Have to pump it a few times, that kind of thing. I've done it by myself. It's just a matter of having the right length chunk of 2x4 to wedge between the seat and the brake pedal. So hopefully that will work for us again. I think we've taken this one far enough for today. This is getting a little bit on the long side. I do have more footage shot changing the other side, but that's kind of its own little project with having to change that caliper out. So we'll do that in a separate video. Greatly appreciate you taking the time to watch, follow along with what I'm doing here. And if you've gotten this far in the video, can you give me one of those thumb up things? Give me a like. That helps out the channel quite a bit. Tells YouTube that you like what you see. And maybe consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. Ring that bell icon and check out the affiliate link in the description for that grinder. That thing worked sweet for peeling that surface rust off of there. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll catch you guys in the next mess.